Chapter 1. A fresh start. The city glittered like a snow globe shaken by an impatient hand. Cindy Jacobs gripped the steering wheel of her rental car, inching forward in holiday traffic that seemed determined to test her patience. Red brake lights stretched endlessly down the boulevard, and the faint sound of carolers drifted from a nearby plaza, their cheerful voices at odds with the honking horns and muttered curses around her. She exhaled slowly, reminding herself why she was here. New city, new chance, promotion within reach. It was the mantra she'd been repeating since the transfer was approved. This was her shot to climb the ladder at Bright Steps, the children's fashion company she'd poured nearly a decade of her life into. If she nailed this quarter, the regional manager position would finally be hers. But first, she needed a place to live. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, flashing with yet another email marked urgent. Cindy ignored it. She'd promised herself no electronics unless absolutely necessary. Tonight, she wanted quiet. Maybe a cup of raspberry tea if she could find a hotel kettle that didn't smell like burnt coffee. She'd been scrolling apartment listings since dawn, and so far, every option felt wrong. Too sterile, too cramped, too close to the office. She wanted space to breathe, not another box that screamed deadlines and fluorescent lights. The traffic light turned green, and Cindy eased forward, her eyes flicking to the snow-dusted storefronts. Wreaths hung from lampposts, twinkle lights framed every window, and a giant inflatable Santa waved from the roof of a diner. It was also festive and overwhelming. Back home, Christmas had been quiet. Just her, a book, and maybe a playlist of soft jazz. Here, the season was loud and unapologetic. She pulled into the hotel parking lot and killed the engine, sagging against the seat. Her laptop bag sat like a brick in the back seat, whispering about reports and projections. Cindy ignored it too. She grabbed her phone instead, scrolling through the latest listings. High-rise apartments with glossy kitchens, condos boasting urban chic. None of them felt like home. Then she saw it. Room for rent in Victorian home. Females only. Cozy, safe, family-friendly. Contact Bryson Simpson. The photo stopped her cold. A two-story house with a wraparound porch, its railings draped in garland and white lights. A porch swing hung beneath a wreath, and flower boxes overflowed with winter greenery. It looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting, warm, inviting, the kind of place where time slowed down. Cindy clicked the details. 3 rooms rented out, shared kitchen and living spaces. The note about females only caught her eye, and then the explanation. A young girl lives here with her father, seeking tenants who will respect a family environment. Her curiosity sparked. It wasn't the sleek independence she'd imagined, but something about that porch tugged at her. Maybe it was the promise of quiet evenings without the hum of office gossip. Maybe it was the idea of laughter echoing down hallways instead of the sterile silence of an apartment tower. She tapped the number and hit call before she could overthink it. The line rang twice. Hello. The voice was deep, warm, and slightly cautious. Hi. Is this Bryson Simpson? Cindy shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of how impulsive this was. Yes. Who's calling? My name's Cindy Jacobs. I saw your listing for a room. She hesitated, then added, I just transferred here for work and, well, your place looks amazing. There was a pause, then a chuckle that sounded like relief. You're in luck. The room's still available. When would you like to see it? Cindy glanced at the dashboard clock. Nearly 6. Snowflakes were starting to drift lazily past the windshield. Tomorrow morning, if that works? Morning's perfect, Bryson said. We'll be home. Just watch out for the porch steps. They get slick when it snows. She smiled despite herself. Thanks for the warning. They exchanged the address, and Cindy ended the call feeling lighter than she had all day. Maybe this was crazy, renting a room in a stranger's house, but something told her it was worth a look. Back in her hotel room, Cindy brewed raspberry tea and curled up in the armchair by the window. Outside, the city glowed under a fresh layer of snow, carolers' voices floating faintly through the glass. She sipped slowly, imagining that porch swing, the garland, the promise of something different. For the first time since the transfer, the lights at the end of the tunnel didn't look like fluorescent bulbs in a boardroom. They looked like Christmas lights on a Victorian porch. Chapter 2. The house on Maple Street. The next morning, Cindy drove through a neighborhood that looked like it had been plucked from a Christmas card. Maple Street curved gently past rows of Victorian homes, each dressed in garlands and wreaths, their porches glowing with warm lights against the pale winter sky. Snow crunched under her tires, and the scent of pine drifted faintly from somewhere nearby. She slowed as she spotted the address Bryson had given her. The house stood proudly at the corner, its wraparound porch framed by white railings and green garland dotted with red bows. A porch swing swayed lazily in the breeze, and 2 rocking chairs sat side by side like old friends. Flower boxes overflowed with winter greenery, and a wreath with a plaid ribbon hung on the front door. Cindy felt her breath catch. It's perfect, she thought, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. Not perfect in the glossy magazine cover way, perfect in the way that whispered, slow down, breathe, you're home. She parked at the curb and stepped out, boots crunching on the salted walkway. The air was crisp, carrying the distant sound of church bells and the faint laughter of children playing somewhere down the street. Cindy climbed the porch steps carefully, remembering Bryson's warning about slick boards. Her gloved hand brushed the railing, and she smiled at the tiny string of lights twined around it. Before she could knock, the door flew open. A little girl stood there, grinning like she'd been waiting all morning. Bright blue eyes sparkled beneath a fringe of bangs, and two pigtails bounced as she clutched a well-loved teddy bear in one arm. Her pink sweater was dusted with glitter, and her socks didn't match. One striped, one polka-dotted. "Hi," she chirped. "Are you the new lady?" Cindy blinked, then laughed. "I might be. Are you the official greeter?" The girl nodded solemnly, then broke into another grin. "I'm Emma. Daddy says I'm good at first impressions." "Well, Emma, you're excellent at them," Cindy said, crouching to meet her eye level. "I'm Cindy." Emma's eyes widened. "Like Cinderella. Do you have glass slippers?" "Not today," Cindy said, amused. "Just snow boots." Emma giggled and spun on her heel. "Daddy, she's here." Her voice echoed down the hallway as she darted off, teddy bear flopping against her side. Cindy straightened, her smile lingering as she stepped inside. The entryway smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine, and soft instrumental carols played from somewhere deeper in the house. A staircase curved upward, its banister wrapped in garland and tiny white lights. The walls were painted a warm cream, and family photos lined the hallway. Emma at various ages, a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile holding her in his arms. Footsteps approached, and then Bryson appeared. He was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and a flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his expression carried that mix of caution and warmth she'd heard in his voice last night. When he smiled, it was quick but genuine, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Cindy?" he asked. "That's me," she said, suddenly aware of the snow melting on her boots. "Thanks for letting me come by." "Of course." He gestured toward the hallway. "Come in, make yourself comfortable. Emma's already decided you're moving in, so no pressure." Cindy laughed, following him past the staircase. "She's persuasive. She gets that from Helen," Bryson said, his tone fond. "You'll meet her soon. She's our resident baker and honorary grandmother." They passed a doorway where the scent of sugar and butter wafted out, and Cindy glimpsed a cozy kitchen with copper pots hanging above an island. A woman with silver hair was pulling a tray of cookies from the oven, humming along to the carols. She waved cheerfully, and Cindy waved back, feeling oddly like she'd stepped into a holiday movie. Bryson led her down a short hall to a door painted soft blue. "This would be your room," he said, opening it. Cindy stepped inside and felt her shoulders relax. The space was simple but inviting. A full bed with a quilt in muted reds and greens, a dresser topped with a small lamp, and a window overlooking the snowy backyard where a swing set stood beneath a bare oak tree. A wreath hung above the headboard, and a faint scent of cedar lingered in the air. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "Much nicer than the apartments I've seen." Bryson leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "We try to keep it comfortable. Rent includes utilities, kitchen privileges, and Helen's cookies if you're lucky." "That might be the best perk I've heard all week," Cindy said, smiling. He chuckled. "We've got two other tenants, Helen, who you just saw, and Brittany, a college student. She's quiet, keeps to herself mostly. Everyone gets along, which is important." Cindy nodded, running her fingers over the quilt. "It feels safe." "That's the goal," Bryson said softly. For a moment, his eyes held hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding of what it meant to crave peace. Emma burst into the room then, scattering the moment like confetti. "Do you like it? Daddy painted the walls blue because it's a happy color." "It is happy," Cindy said, crouching again. "You have good taste." Emma beamed. "If you move in, can we play dress up? Brittany says I'm a fashion icon." Cindy laughed. "I work in fashion, so I think we'd make a great team." Emma gasped like this was the best news of her life and dashed off again, shouting, "Brittany! She's a fashion lady." Bryson shook his head, amused. "She's going to plan your entire wardrobe if you're not careful." "I'll take my chances," Cindy said, smiling. They discussed rent, house rules, and logistics, but Cindy barely heard the details. Her mind kept circling back to the warmth of the kitchen, the garland on the banister, the way laughter seemed to live in these walls. When Bryson walked her to the door, she hesitated on the porch, snowflakes catching in her hair. "I'll take it," she said impulsively. Bryson's brows lifted. "You're sure?" Cindy nodded. "I've been looking for a place that feels like home. This does." His smile was slow, but it reached his eyes. "Welcome to Maple Street, Cindy." As she walked back to her car, the porch lights twinkled behind her, and for the first time in months, Cindy felt something stir. A sense of belonging, fragile but real, like the first snowflake melting on her glove. Chapter 3. Settling in, Cindy balanced a box of books against her hip as she stepped through the front door of the Victorian house. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla greeted her like an old friend, mingling with the faint hum of carols drifting from the kitchen. Snowflakes clung to her coat, melting into tiny droplets that sparkled under the warm glow of the entryway lights. Need a hand? Bryson's voice came from behind her, smooth and easy, like he'd been waiting for the chance to ask. She turned, startled to find him standing on the porch, his breath curling in the cold air. He wore a navy sweater that looked far too cozy for someone who claimed to be just the landlord. Cindy smiled, adjusting the box. I've got it, unless you're volunteering for the heavy lifting. His grin was quick, boyish. I'm a professional volunteer. He reached for the box before she could protest, his fingers brushing hers briefly, just enough to send a flicker of awareness up her arm. Thanks, she said, stepping aside as he carried the box down the hall like it weighed nothing. Of course he makes it look easy, she thought, tugging off her gloves. He probably chops wood in his spare time and rescues kittens from trees. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a tiara and a tutu over her jeans. Cindy's here, she announced like a town crier. Daddy, can she play dress-up after she unpacks? Bryson shot Cindy an apologetic look. You don't have to. I'd be honored, Cindy said, laughing. But only if I get a tiara too. Emma squealed and vanished, presumably to raid her treasure trove of glitter. Bryson set the box on the bed in Cindy's room and glanced around. You've got everything you need? Extra blankets are in the closet. Helen insists on keeping enough to survive a blizzard. Cindy smiled, taking in the quilted bedspread and the wreath above the headboard. It's perfect. Honestly, this feels more like home than any apartment I've seen. His expression softened. That's good to hear. Before Cindy could say more, a voice called from the kitchen. Bryson, taste this frosting before I commit to it. That's my cue, he said, backing toward the door. Helen's baking for the neighborhood cookie exchange. If you're smart, you'll wander in before Emma eats all the samples. Cindy laughed as he disappeared down the hall, then turned to unpack. Her books lined the dresser neatly, and her favorite mug, white porcelain with a raspberry motif, claimed its spot on the nightstand. She ran a hand over the quilt, feeling the quiet settle around her like a soft blanket. This was what she'd wanted, a place where the world slowed down. By the time Cindy wandered into the kitchen, the air was thick with the scent of sugar and spice. Helen stood at the counter, silver hair tucked under a red apron, wielding a spatula like a conductor's baton. Bowls of frosting in pastel shades surrounded her, and a tray of gingerbread men cooled nearby. Ah, the new tenant, Helen declared, eyes twinkling. Come here, sweetheart. Tell me if this peppermint frosting is too bold. Cindy obeyed, tasting a dab from the spatula. It's perfect, she said honestly. Like Christmas in a spoon. Helen beamed. You'll do just fine here. She thrust a plate of cookies into Cindy's hands. Eat, you're too thin. Cindy laughed, nibbling a cookie as Emma barreled into the room. Tiara Askew. Cindy, Brittany says she'll play dolls later, but you promised dress up first. Give her a minute to breathe, Bryson said, appearing with a mug of coffee. He leaned against the doorframe, watching Cindy with an expression that was equal parts amusement and something quieter, something that made her pulse skip. I'm ready, Cindy said, brushing crumbs from her fingers. Lead the way, princess. Emma grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the living room, where a plastic trunk overflowed with costumes. Brittany sat cross-legged on the rug, textbooks spread around her like fallen leaves. She looked up with a grin. Welcome to the madhouse. I love it already, Cindy said, sinking to the floor as Emma dumped a pile of sequined scarves into her lap. For the next hour, Cindy wore a tiara, a feather boa, and a pair of sunglasses that made her look like a retired movie star. Emma declared her queen of fashion, and Brittany snapped photos for evidence. Bryson wandered through occasionally, shaking his head but smiling in that quiet way that made Cindy wonder what he was thinking. Later, when the costumes were packed away and Emma was tucked into bed with her teddy bear, Cindy found herself in the kitchen again, rinsing a mug under warm water. Bryson stood beside her, drying a plate. Thanks for indulging her, he said softly. She doesn't get that kind of attention often. Cindy glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. She's amazing, she said. Honestly, I think I needed that as much as she did. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the hum of the dishwasher and the faint strains of carols drifting from the living room. Then Helen bustled in, breaking the spell with a cheerful, "Who wants cocoa?" Bryson chuckled, stepping back. You'll learn quickly. Helen doesn't take no for an answer. Cindy smiled, feeling warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with cocoa. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't counting the minutes until she could be alone. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Chapter 4. The first spark, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned after a day of laughter and chaos. Cindy padded softly down the hallway, her slippers whispering against the hardwood. Emma had finally surrendered to sleep after an epic bedtime story involving a unicorn and a pirate ship, and Helen had retired with a mystery novel and a plate of cookies. Brittany was out with friends, leaving the house in a rare hush. Cindy cradled her favorite mug, steam curling from the raspberry tea inside. She'd planned to sip it in her room, maybe crack open the novel waiting on her nightstand, but the glow from the kitchen drew her in. Warm light spilled across the floor, and the faint scent of cinnamon lingered like a memory. Bryson stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, rinsing a mixing bowl. His hair was slightly mussed, and his flannel shirt looked softer than any fabric had a right to. He glanced up when Cindy entered, his smile slow and easy. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Just thirsty," Cindy said, lifting her mug. "And curious. Do you always bake at midnight?" He chuckled, setting the bowl aside. "Helen's frosting marathon left me with a sugar craving. I figured I'd make something simple." "Simple?" Cindy eyed the counter, where a tray of golden brown scones cooled beside a jar of jam. "That looks suspiciously professional." Bryson shrugged, a hint of pride in his grin. "Single dad life. You learn to cook or you live on cereal." Cindy laughed, leaning against the doorway. "I can make toast. Sometimes." "Impressive," he teased. "Butter or no butter? Depends on how fancy I'm feeling." She smiled, then hesitated. "You mind if I join you?" His gaze softened. "Not at all." She crossed the kitchen, the hum of the dishwasher filling the silence between them. Bryson slid a plate toward her, topped with a scone that smelled like heaven. "Try it. Helen says they're my best." Cindy broke off a piece, the buttery crumb melting on her tongue. "Okay, that's unfair. You bake like this and still manage to look like you chop wood for fun." Bryson laughed, a low, warm sound that curled through the quiet. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was," Cindy said, smiling. "Seriously, these are amazing." He leaned against the counter, watching her with an expression that made her pulse skip, a mix of amusement and something deeper, something that felt like curiosity. "So," he said, "what brings you to our little corner of the world? Besides the obvious, work." Cindy sipped her tea, considering. "I needed a change. My old city. It was all noise and deadlines. I wanted space to breathe." Bryson nodded slowly. "I get that. After the divorce, I had to figure out what mattered. Turns out it wasn't the job or the house, it was Emma. Everything else came second." His voice was steady, but Cindy heard the weight beneath it, the kind of honesty that didn't come easily. She set her mug down, meeting his gaze. "That must have been hard." "It was," he admitted. "But she makes it worth it." For a moment, silence stretched between them, warm and unspoken. Cindy felt the pull of it, the quiet strength in his words, the way his eyes held hers like he wasn't afraid of what he might find there. Her heart thudded, unexpected and insistent. Then Bryson smiled, breaking the tension with a gentle tease. "So, Toast Queen, what's your secret talent, besides moving boxes like a pro?" Cindy laughed, grateful for the shift. "I can read an entire novel in one night. Does that count?" "Only if you share the ending," he said, grinning. She shook her head. "No spoilers. You'll have to suffer like everyone else." Their laughter mingled in the quiet kitchen, soft and easy, like they'd been doing this for years. Cindy finished her tea, reluctant to leave but aware of the hour. "I should let you sleep," she said, standing. Bryson's smile lingered. "Thanks for the company." "Thanks for the scone," she replied. And for reasons she couldn't name, her voice felt softer than usual. As she walked back to her room, Cindy realized something had shifted. Not in a dramatic fireworks way, but in the quiet spark of possibility. The kind that glows under the surface, waiting for the right moment to catch fire. Chapter 5. Holiday Chaos. Cindy woke to the sound of laughter and the faint jingle of bells. For a moment, she lay still, blinking at the soft glow of morning light filtering through her window. The house hummed with life. Emma's giggles, Helen's voice floating from the kitchen, and the unmistakable thud of something hitting the floor followed by Bryson's resigned sigh. She slipped into jeans and a sweater, curiosity tugging her toward the commotion. The living room looked like a craft store had exploded. Glitter sparkled across the rug like frost, and a rainbow of construction paper littered every surface. Emma knelt in the center of it all, wielding a glue stick like a sword. "Daddy, it needs more sparkle," she declared, holding up what appeared to be a cardboard angel with one wing suspiciously larger than the other. Bryson crouched beside her, his flannel sleeves dusted with glitter. "Emma, if we add more sparkle, the angel's going to blind the entire school." "That's the point," Emma said, grinning. Cindy laughed, stepping into the room. "What's going on here? Did a craft tornado hit?" Bryson looked up, his expression equal parts amusement and defeat. "School Christmas project." Emma insisted on making the biggest, brightest angel in the class. Emma beamed. "It's going to win the contest." "There's a contest?" Cindy asked, intrigued. "Apparently," Bryson said dryly, "judged by who can make the janitor cry when he sees the cleanup." Cindy chuckled, kneeling beside Emma. "Well, if you want sparkle, you've come to the right person. I work in fashion, we practically live on glitter." Emma gasped like Cindy had just revealed a superpower. "Help me. Daddy doesn't understand sparkle." Bryson raised a brow. "I understand sparkle. I just don't want to vacuum it for the next decade." Cindy grinned. "Consider this a team effort." She grabbed a sheet of gold paper and scissors, her inner perfectionist kicking in. "Let's give this angel some balance." For the next hour, The three of them worked side by side, Emma directing like a tiny CEO, Cindy cutting precise shapes, and Bryson gamely following instructions while muttering about glitter being a conspiracy. At one point, Emma sneezed, sending a cloud of sparkles into the air like fairy dust. Cindy laughed so hard she nearly dropped the glue gun. "Don't breathe too hard," Bryson warned, brushing glitter from his hair. "You'll end up looking like a disco ball." "You say that like it's a bad thing," Cindy teased, handing him a perfectly cut wing. Their fingers brushed, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single touch. Warmth flickered, quick and unexpected, before Emma's triumphant shout shattered the moment. "Done," she announced, holding up the angel like a trophy. It was crooked, glittery, and absolutely glorious. Bryson smiled, pride softening his features. "Looks like a winner to me." Emma hugged Cindy fiercely. "You're the best helper ever." Cindy hugged her back, laughter bubbling in her chest. "Anytime, kiddo." Helen appeared in the doorway then, hands on her hips. "What on earth? Oh my stars." Her eyes swept the glitter-strewn battlefield. "Bryson Simpson, you promised me no craft explosions." Bryson held up his hands. "It was a controlled explosion." Helen snorted. "Controlled, my foot." She disappeared, muttering about brooms and men who think they know cleanup. Cindy grinned at Bryson. "Controlled, huh?" He gave her a look that was half sheepish, half amused. "Remind me to never underestimate Emma's persuasive powers." "Noted," Cindy said, smiling. As they gathered scraps and wiped glue from the table, Cindy felt something warm settle in her chest, a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she'd been craving. This wasn't just a house. It was laughter and chaos and moments that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something more. Chapter 6. Unexpected invitations. The first snowstorm of December had left Maple Street looking like a postcard. Icicles glittered along the porch railings, and the yard wore a pristine white coat that Emma had already tried to ruin with snow angels. Cindy stood at the kitchen counter, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard as she finalized a sales report. Her tea had gone cold an hour ago, but she barely noticed. Quarter-end numbers waited for no one. "Work mode," Bryson said from behind her, his voice warm with amusement. Cindy jumped, nearly sending her spreadsheet into chaos. "Sorry," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "You move like a ninja." He grinned, leaning against the doorway. "I've had practice. Emma's stealth training is top-notch." Cindy smiled, closing her laptop with a sigh. "I was just finishing up." "Good timing," Bryson said. "Emma has a favor to ask." As if on cue, Emma barreled into the kitchen wearing a red velvet dress and a headband with reindeer antlers. "Cindy, you have to come to my recital." Cindy blinked. "Recital?" Emma nodded so hard her antlers wobbled. "Tomorrow night, I'm singing Jingle Bell Rock with my class. Daddy says it's the biggest event of the year." Bryson raised a brow. "I said it's important to her." Emma ignored him, eyes wide and pleading. "Please? Brittany's coming, and Helen says she'll bake cookies shaped like music notes." Cindy hesitated. Tomorrow night was supposed to be her prep marathon for the big pitch on Monday, the one that could make or break her promotion. But Emma's hopeful face made her heart squeeze. "I'd love to," Cindy said, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it." Emma squealed and hugged her legs before darting off, shouting something about glittery sheet music. Bryson watched her go, then turned back to Cindy. "Thanks. It means a lot to her." Cindy shrugged lightly, though her chest felt warm. "She's hard to say no to." "She gets that from Helen," Bryson said, his mouth curving. "But I appreciate it too." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the kitchen felt smaller, quieter. Cindy looked away first, pretending to fuss with her mug. "So, what's the dress code for this recital? Sequins? Antlers?" Bryson chuckled. "Just show up. That'll be enough." The next evening, Cindy found herself in a crowded school auditorium that smelled faintly of crayons and cocoa. Strings of lights framed the stage, and paper snowflakes dangled from the ceiling like frozen stars. Helen sat beside her, clutching a tin of cookies, while Brittany scrolled through her phone, promising to record every second. When Emma stepped onto the stage, Cindy felt an unexpected rush of pride. The little girl sang with gusto, antlers bobbing, her voice bright and fearless. Bryson stood near the aisle, his expression soft, eyes shining with something that made Cindy's throat tighten. After the applause and chaos of parents snapping photos, Emma launched herself into Cindy's arms. "You came!" she cried, glitter dusting her cheeks. "Of course," Cindy said, hugging her tight. "You were amazing." Bryson appeared then, his smile slow and warm. "She's been talking about this for weeks." "And she nailed it," Cindy said, meeting his gaze. For a heartbeat, the noise around them faded. The laughter, the carols, the shuffle of boots on linoleum. It was just the two of them, standing in the glow of Christmas lights, something unspoken humming between them. Then Emma tugged Cindy's hand. "Come on. Daddy says we can get cocoa." Bryson chuckled, falling into step beside them. "You heard the boss." As they walked out into the crisp night air, Cindy realized something had shifted again. Not in her schedule, not in her plans, but in her heart. And for the first time, she didn't mind at all. Chapter 7. Snowstorm and Secrets. The storm rolled in like an uninvited guest, swift, loud, and determined to stay. By late afternoon, snowflakes swirled past the windows in dizzy spirals, and the wind howled against the eaves like a restless spirit. Cindy stood at the living room window, watching the world vanish beneath a curtain of white. "Well," Helen announced from her armchair, knitting needles clicking like castanets, "we're not going anywhere tonight." Bryson appeared from the hallway, phone in hand. "Roads are closed. Power lines holding for now. But," he glanced at the flickering lights overhead. "Could be a long night." Emma, perched on the couch in her unicorn pajamas, clapped her hands. "Snow day party." Cindy laughed, tugging her sweater tighter. "What does a snow day party involve?" "Games," Emma declared. "And cocoa. And maybe sledding if Daddy says yes." Bryson raised a brow. "Sledding in a blizzard? Hard pass." Emma pouted dramatically, then brightened. "Board games, then." Minutes later, the coffee table was buried under a stack of boxes. Candyland, Scrabble, and something called Penguin Panic that looked suspiciously chaotic. Cindy settled cross-legged on the rug, Emma beside her, while Bryson fetched mugs of steaming cocoa topped with marshmallows. Brittany wandered in with a blanket and a playlist of Christmas classics, her phone already recording snippets for social media. The first round of Candyland was harmless enough, until Emma decided the rules were too boring and invented her own, involving glitter tokens and dramatic rescues of gingerbread men. Cindy played along, laughing until her cheeks hurt, while Bryson shook his head, pretending to protest but clearly enjoying every second. By the time Penguin Panic hit the table, chaos reigned. Plastic penguins toppled like dominoes, Emma shrieked with glee, and Cindy found herself laughing so hard she nearly spilled her cocoa. Bryson caught the mug just in time, his hand steady against hers. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low enough that it felt like a secret. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the room faded, the laughter, the music, the storm outside. It was just him, close enough that Cindy could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. She swallowed, suddenly aware of her pulse. "Thanks," she said softly. He smiled, slow and warm, before Emma launched herself between them with a triumphant cry. "I win." Bryson chuckled, leaning back. "Of course you do." Later, when Emma was tucked into bed and Brittany had retreated upstairs, Cindy wandered into the kitchen for more tea. The storm still raged outside, wind rattling the windows, but the house felt cocooned in warmth, garland glowing softly, the scent of cocoa lingering in the air. Bryson was there, leaning against the counter, a mug cradled in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his expression easy but tired in a way that spoke of long days and quiet resilience. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet," Cindy said, filling her kettle. "Too much sugar. And maybe too much penguin chaos." He smiled faintly. "Emma loves nights like this. Makes me forget how quiet it used to be." Cindy hesitated, then asked softly, "Was it hard? After everything?" Bryson's gaze dropped to his mug. "Yeah, harder than I thought. When her mom left, Emma was too. I didn't know what I was doing. Just knew I couldn't let her feel like she wasn't enough." Cindy's chest tightened. "She's lucky to have you." He looked up then, and the weight in his eyes made her breath catch. "I'm lucky to have her." Silence stretched, warm and fragile. Cindy wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she reached for her tea, fingers brushing his as she set the kettle down. The touch was brief, but it sparked like static, lingering long after she stepped back. Bryson's smile was quiet, almost wistful. "Snow's supposed to stop by morning. Roads might clear." Cindy nodded, though part of her wished the storm would linger, just a little longer. As she carried her tea upstairs, the wind howled outside, but inside, something softer stirred. A secret warmth, fragile and bright, waiting for its chance to grow. Chapter 8. The almost kiss. The storm had passed, leaving Maple Street draped in a pristine blanket of snow that glittered under the pale winter sun. Cindy stood on the porch, breath puffing in the crisp air, a coil of twinkle lights slung over her arm like a reluctant pet. Bryson emerged from the doorway carrying a box of ornaments, his flannel sleeves rolled up, his smile easy. "Ready to make this place look like a Christmas catalog?" he asked. Cindy grinned. "I thought it already did." "Emma says we need more sparkle," Bryson replied, setting the box down. "And when Emma says sparkle, resistance is futile." Cindy laughed, unwinding the lights. "I'm starting to think Emma runs this house." "She does," Bryson said, stepping closer to help. "I just pay the bills." They worked side by side, looping garland along the porch railings, their breath mingling in the frosty air. Cindy's fingers brushed his more than once. Accidentally, she told herself, but each touch sent a flicker of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the cocoa waiting inside. "Hold this," Bryson said, passing her the end of the light strand. She reached for it, but the cord snagged, tangling around her wrist. She laughed, tugging at the knot. "I swear these things have a mind of their own." Here, Bryson said, stepping closer. His hands were steady, warm against her chilled skin as he worked the knot free. Cindy's breath caught, not because of the lights, but because of the way his face was suddenly inches from hers, his eyes crinkling at the corners, flecks of gold catching in the winter sun. Got it, he murmured, his voice low, intimate. Cindy swallowed, her pulse thudding like a drum. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The garland, the snow, the faint scent of pine. His gaze dipped to her lips, and hers flicked to his, and everything inside her whispered yes. Then the door banged open. Daddy! Emma burst onto the porch, clutching a glittery ornament shaped like a reindeer. Look what I made! Bryson stepped back so fast he nearly tripped over the box. Cindy blinked, heat rushing to her cheeks as Emma barreled between them, oblivious to the tension she'd shattered. It's beautiful, Cindy said, forcing a smile as Emma held up the ornament like a trophy. Bryson cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck. Nice work, kiddo. Emma beamed. Can we hang it now? Absolutely, Cindy said, her voice steadier than she felt. As Emma chattered about reindeer and glitter glue, Cindy looped the last strand of lights along the railing, her hands trembling just enough to notice. She stole a glance at Bryson, who was listening to Emma with a smile that didn't quite hide the flicker of something else, something that matched the storm brewing quietly inside her. When the porch finally glowed with twinkle lights and Emma skipped back inside, Cindy lingered for a moment, staring at the snow-dusted yard. Bryson stood beside her, silent, his breath curling in the cold. Thanks for helping, he said softly. Any time, Cindy replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And as they stepped inside, Cindy knew one thing for certain. Whatever had sparked between them wasn't going away. It was only getting stronger. Chapter 9. Work versus heart. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, but Cindy barely noticed. Her laptop screen glared back at her from the dining table, a battlefield of charts and bullet points. Monday's presentation loomed like a storm cloud, her chance to secure the promotion she'd chased for years. Every slide had to be perfect, every number airtight. She rubbed her temples, ignoring the muffled sound of laughter drifting from the living room where Emma and Brittany were building a gingerbread house. Cindy had promised herself she'd join them later, but later kept slipping further away. Still at it. Bryson's voice broke through her concentration. She looked up to find him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Just a little longer, Cindy said, forcing a smile. Big pitch Monday. He stepped closer, his presence warm against the chill of her stress. You've been at it for hours. Even Helen's threatening to stage an intervention. Cindy laughed weakly. Tell Helen I'm immune to interventions. Bryson tilted his head, studying her. You know, I've seen Emma build a gingerbread house faster than you've stared at that slide. Cindy sighed, closing her laptop with a soft click. I just need this to go right. Bryson pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his gaze steady. You're good at what you do. Anyone can see that. The words were simple, but they landed like a bomb. Cindy felt her chest loosen, just a little. Thanks, she murmured. He smiled, slow and reassuring. You've got this. And if you don't, well, Helen says cookies fix everything. Cindy laughed, the tension easing from her shoulders. Helen might be onto something. As if summoned, Helen appeared in the doorway, hands on her hips. Are you two talking about me? Always, Bryson said, grinning. Helen snorted, then softened as her gaze fell on Cindy. Sweetheart, work will wait. Life won't. Come have cocoa before Emma eats all the marshmallows. Cindy hesitated, torn between deadlines and the warmth of voices drifting from the living room. Then Emma's giggle rang out, bright and unguarded, and something inside Cindy shifted. 5 minutes, she said, standing. Helen smiled knowingly. That's how it starts. 5 minutes turned into an hour. Cindy found herself laughing as Emma proudly displayed a gingerbread house that looked like it had survived an earthquake. Bryson sat beside her on the couch, their shoulders brushing lightly, and every accidental touch felt deliberate. When Emma declared Cindy the official sparkle consultant, Bryson shot her a look that made her pulse skip, a look that said he noticed more than he let on. Later, as Cindy climbed the stairs to her room, laptop forgotten for now, Helen's words lingered in her mind. Work will wait. Life won't. And for the first time, Cindy wondered if chasing the promotion was worth missing moments like this, the kind that felt like home. Chapter 10. Christmas Eve magic. Christmas Eve dawned crisp and bright, the kind of winter morning that looked like it had been painted by hand. Cindy woke early, nerves buzzing like holiday lights. Today was the big pitch, the one that could seal her promotion and justify every late night she'd spent hunched over spreadsheets. She dressed in her sharpest suit, slipped on heels that meant business, and whispered a silent prayer over her coffee. The presentation went flawlessly. Her voice was steady, her slides crisp, her answers sharp enough to impress even the toughest executives. When the meeting ended with nods of approval and a promise to discuss next steps after the holidays, Cindy felt the weight lift from her shoulders like snow sliding off a roof. She'd done it. She'd fought for this moment and won. But as she drove back through streets glittering with Christmas lights, something unexpected tugged at her. The victory felt hollow without someone to share it with. And when her GPS announced she was 5 minutes from Maple Street, Cindy realized exactly who she wanted to see. The house glowed like a beacon against the twilight, garland twinkling along the porch railings, wreaths catching the last blush of sunset. Cindy stepped inside, breath curling in the frosty air, and was greeted by the scent of cinnamon and pine and laughter. Emma barreled toward her in a red plaid dress, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Cindy, you're home. Daddy said you might miss dinner, but you didn't." "Wouldn't dream of it," Cindy said, scooping her up for a hug. "You look beautiful." Emma twirled, antlers bouncing on her headband. "Helen made a turkey, and Brittany says we're doing Secret Santa." Helen appeared from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, eyes twinkling. "You're just in time, sweetheart. Grab a plate before Emma eats all the rolls." Bryson followed, carrying a tray of steaming cocoa. He wore a dark sweater that made his eyes look impossibly warm, and when his gaze met Cindy's, something inside her shifted, quiet, certain, like a door opening. "Glad you made it," he said softly. "Me too," Cindy replied, and for once, she meant it with every fiber of her being. Dinner was loud and perfect. Helen's turkey, Brittany's jokes, Emma's endless chatter about Santa's flight plan. Cindy laughed until her cheeks ached, warmth blooming in her chest like a fire that had been waiting for its spark. When the plates were cleared and Emma dashed off to check the sky for reindeer, Bryson disappeared briefly, returning with a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This is for you," he said, holding it out. Cindy blinked, surprised. "Bryson, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. She peeled back the paper to reveal a delicate tea set, white porcelain with raspberry motifs curling along the edges. Her breath caught. "You remembered." His smile was slow, tender. "You mentioned raspberry tea your first night here. Thought you could use something that feels like home." Cindy stared at the gift, then at him, her throat tight. "It's perfect," she whispered. For a moment, the world narrowed to the glow of the tree lights, the hush of carols drifting from the radio, and the warmth in Bryson's eyes. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as she cradled the box. The touch lingered, soft, deliberate, full of promise. "Cindy," he began, voice low. "Daddy." Emma's voice rang out from the hallway, shattering the moment like a snowball against glass. "Santa's coming. I saw him on the tracker." Bryson chuckled, stepping back, though his gaze held hers like a secret. "Guess we'd better get ready." Cindy smiled, heart pounding, and followed him into the living room where laughter and lights waited. But as she settled on the couch beside him, cocoa warming her hands, one thought pulsed steady and sure. This feeling, this house, this man was what she'd been chasing all along. Chapter 11. Confession. Under the lights, the house had gone quiet, the kind of hush that follows laughter and cocoa and too many cookies. Emma was asleep upstairs, curled around her teddy bear, dreaming of reindeer and magic. Helen had retired with her mystery novel, and Brittany was humming softly in her room, scrolling through holiday photos. Cindy stood in the hallway, coat draped over her arm, heart thudding like a drum. She wasn't ready for the night to end. Bryson appeared from the living room, his sweater catching the glow of the Christmas tree lights. He held her gaze for a moment, something unspoken flickering there, warm, steady, and terrifying in its simplicity. "Walk with me?" he asked, voice low. Cindy nodded, breath catching. She slipped on her coat and followed him out to the porch, where the world lay hushed beneath a blanket of snow. The garland twinkled softly along the railings, and the lights they'd strung together shimmered like captured stars. The air was crisp, scented faintly with pine and distant chimney smoke. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching snowflakes drift lazily under the porch light. Cindy's pulse raced, her thoughts tumbling like the flakes, messy, bright, impossible to catch. Bryson turned to her, his breath curling in the cold. "You know," he said quietly, "when you moved in, I told myself it was just another tenant. Nothing complicated." Cindy swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "And now," his smile was slow, almost shy, "now I can't imagine this house without you." The words landed like a spark in dry tinder, soft, then blazing. Cindy's throat tightened, her heart pounding so hard she wondered if he could hear it. "Bryson," she faltered, searching for words that didn't sound like a confession scribbled in the margins of her soul. "I didn't plan this. Any of it." "Neither did I," he said, stepping closer. His eyes held hers, steady and sure. "But I'm glad it happened." Snowflakes clung to his hair, glittering like frost. Cindy felt the world tilt, narrowing to the space between them. The garland, the lights, the hush of winter. Her breath hitched as his hand brushed hers, tentative but deliberate, fingers curling like a question. She answered without words. Their hands intertwined, warm against the chill, and Bryson's smile deepened, soft and certain. He lifted his other hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek, his touch feather-light. Cindy's breath trembled, her pulse a wild rhythm, and when his lips finally met hers, it was everything she hadn't known she was waiting for. gentle, lingering, full of promise. The porch lights glowed around them, casting halos on the snow, and for a moment, time held its breath. When they parted, Cindy laughed softly, the sound shaky and bright. "Well," she whispered, "that was unexpected." Bryson grinned, his forehead resting against hers. "Best surprise of the year." Cindy smiled, her heart steady now, like it had found its rhythm. "Mine too." Inside, the tree lights twinkled, and upstairs, Emma dreamed of magic. Out here, under the garland and stars, Cindy realized something simple and undeniable. She wasn't just renting a room. She'd found a home and maybe, just maybe, the love she'd stopped believing in. Chapter 12. A new chapter. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in quiet magic. Snow blanketed Maple Street in soft white, muffling the world beyond the porch. Inside, the house glowed with garland and tree lights, the scent of cinnamon rolls drifting from the kitchen like a promise. Cindy padded down the stairs in cozy socks, her heart light in a way it hadn't felt in years. Emma was already in the living room, tearing into a mountain of wrapping paper with the enthusiasm of a 5-year-old on a sugar rush. "Santa came!" she squealed, holding up a stuffed unicorn like a trophy. Helen sat in her armchair, sipping cocoa and smiling like she'd orchestrated the entire holiday herself. Brittany lounged on the rug, recording Emma's victory dance for posterity. And Bryson stood by the tree, his sweater catching the glow of the lights, his smile slow and warm when he saw Cindy. "Morning," he said softly, like the word was meant just for her. "Morning," Cindy replied, her pulse skipping in that now familiar way. Emma bounded over, dragging Cindy toward the tree. "Open yours. Daddy says you have the sparkliest wrapping paper." Cindy laughed, settling on the couch as Emma thrust a box into her hands. The paper shimmered in silver and gold, and when she peeled it back, her breath caught. A soft cashmere scarf in deep cranberry, warm and elegant. "Bryson," she began, but he shook his head, his smile gentle. "Consider it a thank you," he said, "for making this house feel like home." Cindy's throat tightened. "It already does," she whispered. Their eyes held, and for a moment, the room faded. The laughter, the carols, the rustle of paper. It was just them, standing on the edge of something bright and certain. Later, when Emma was busy constructing a fortress out of boxes and Helen was lecturing Brittany on the virtues of handwritten thank you notes, Cindy found herself on the porch with Bryson. The snow glittered under a pale sun, and the lights they'd strung together still twinkled like tiny stars. "So," Bryson said, hands tucked into his pockets, his breath curling in the cold, "what happens after the holidays?" "Back to the grind." Cindy smiled faintly. "The grind will still be there. But," she hesitated, then met his eyes. "I think I want more than that." His gaze softened. "More." She nodded, her voice steady now. "More nights like this. More mornings that feel like Christmas, even when it's July." Bryson's smile was slow, certain. "I'd like that too." He stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the snow-dusted boards. "Cindy, I don't want this to be temporary. You, me, Emma. This feels right." Her breath caught, heart thudding like a drum. "It does," she whispered. "I didn't expect it, but I don't want to lose it." "You won't," Bryson said, his voice low, sure. He reached for her hand, fingers warm against the winter chill. "Stay. Not just for the holidays. For good." Cindy laughed softly, tears pricking her eyes. "Are you asking me to move in? Because technically I already did." He grinned, that boyish smile that made her knees weak. "Fair point. Then maybe I'm asking for something bigger." Her pulse skipped. "Like what?" "Like a future," he said simply. "One where you don't just rent a room, you belong." The words landed like a promise, and Cindy felt something settle inside her. A quiet, steady truth. She squeezed his hand, her smile trembling but sure. "I'd like that future." Bryson's thumb brushed her knuckles, tender and deliberate. "Good, because I've been imagining it for a while now." She laughed softly, leaning into him as the porch lights glowed around them. "Guess we're both planners." "Guess so," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "But for once, I don't mind taking my time." Cindy closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and snow and something warmer, something that felt like home. And for the first time, she wasn't chasing deadlines or promotions or the next big thing. She was chasing joy, and she'd found it. Chapter 13. Epilogue. 1 year later, Maple Street was dressed in winter again. Garland twinkling along the porch railings, wreaths catching the pale December sun. The Victorian house stood as proud and inviting as ever, its wraparound porch glowing under strings of lights that had become tradition. Cindy paused at the gate, breath curling in the frosty air, and smiled. She'd just come from the office, where her name now graced the door of the regional manager's office, a title she'd chased for years, finally hers. The promotion had been everything she imagined, and yet, not the thing that mattered most. Because as she climbed the porch steps, boots crunching softly against the salted boards, the door swung open and Emma barreled out, pigtails flying. "Cindy!" Emma squealed, launching herself into Cindy's arms. Daddy says you're late for cookie decorating. Cindy laughed, hugging her tight. I brought reinforcements. She held up a tin of sprinkles, earning a gasp of delight. Bryson appeared in the doorway, his smile slow and familiar, the kind that still made her heart skip. You didn't have to bribe her, he teased, eyes warm. Bribery works, Cindy said, stepping inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and cocoa, laughter spilling from the kitchen where Helen and Brittany were already deep in frosting negotiations. It felt like stepping into a memory, except now it was her life. Later, when the cookies were decorated, and Emma had consumed enough sugar to power a small city, Cindy slipped onto the porch with Bryson. The snow glittered under the porch lights, just like last year, and the garland shimmered softly in the cold. Hard to believe it's been a year, Bryson said, his voice low, thoughtful. Cindy smiled, leaning against the railing. Feels like yesterday, and forever. He reached for her hand, fingers warm against the chill. You happy? She looked at him, at the house glowing behind them, at the laughter drifting through the door. Her heart felt steady, certain. More than I ever thought I could be. Bryson's smile deepened. That quiet, sure smile she'd come to love. Good, because I've got plans for next year. Her brows lifted, teasing. Plans? Big ones, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. The porch lights caught the silver ribbon, and Cindy's breath hitched. Bryson, she whispered. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that gleamed like frost. I told you last year I wanted a future, he said softly. Still do. With you. For a moment, the world held its breath. The snow, the lights, the hush of winter. Cindy felt tears prick her eyes, her smile trembling but sure. Yes, she whispered, voice breaking on the word. Yes. Bryson slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand steady, his eyes bright. And when he kissed her under the glow of the porch lights, it felt like the perfect ending and the perfect beginning. Inside, Emma's voice rang out, demanding more sprinkles, and Helen declared that cocoa was ready. Cindy laughed against Bryson's lips, joy bubbling like champagne. The porch lights twinkled softly, a promise written in garland and snow. Love had found its home here, and it wasn't going anywhere.